It would be great if it tilts towards being a cold, but I don't think we can say that with certainty yet. I think there's a possibility that that may be the case, but we need more data to be able to say that with certainty. I do think that coronaviruses are going to ultimately end up becoming seasonal because all of the other ones do. This one just takes some time to get to seasonality because there's not enough immunity in the population. It's just going to take some time to see that complete stark seasonality.
And you just heard Dr. Amesh Adlaha of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. He says the time will come that COVID-19 will become a seasonal illness, very much like the flu. While there is as yet no certainty, he also says the Omicron variant might tilt towards being like a cold, joining a chorus of scientists who believe that the new variant might be milder than previous variants.
Preliminary data gathered by the World Health Organization supports such assumption. WHO Emergencies Director Michael Ryan says that while Omicron appears to be more transmissible, it is unlikely to evade vaccine immunity. Over here, researchers are optimistic that COVID-19 might become endemic by summer next year. Good evening, I'm Maricel Halili.
And I'm Ed Lingao. You're watching The Big Story. Just like the flu, a fellow of the Octa Research Group predicts that COVID-19 will no longer cause significant hospitalization or fatalities by next year if current trends continue.
And while the Omicron variant remains a threat, scientists believe it might not be as deadly as earlier variants. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to the big story.
With daily cases at their lowest since July last year, the country's healthcare system that was on the verge of collapse just a few months ago is now back on track. Average healthcare utilization rate is now at 20%. In Manila, quarantine facilities are virtually ghost towns at zero occupancy.
So this is the nurses' quarters. As you can see, there's almost no nurses or healthcare workers here, but there are a few, as you can see, as most of them were actually deployed to the vaccination sites once the cases here decrease significantly.
Christmas decorations are already up, their way of saying to each other, congratulations for a job well done.
Reward na namin yun na napagaling namin yung mga patient.
Microbiologist Father Nick Austriaco of the Octa Research Group says if the trend continues, the COVID-19 may just become an endemic. Just like the common flu, COVID would still be highly contagious, but no longer dangerous to most people, and no longer be a cause for mass hospitalizations.
If we can sustain our vaccination rates, if we can sustain our boosting, if we can obtain enough or at least some antivirals, we will be able to return to pretty much endemic levels, hopefully by next summer.
The possible disruptor would be the emergence of another new variant. But so far, Austriaco says, the Omicron variant looks to be more contagious, but less deadly than the previous variants.
It would just mean that the wave would come. We would have a large number of cases, and not as much as Delta because of the substantial population immunity that we have already. But hospitalizations would be spared.
If this happens, Austriaco says, health protocols can be further relaxed to a more normal state by middle of next year. But for healthcare workers like Dominguez, it helps to keep their guards up.
Yes, we're just on standby actually. In fact, we did well during the last surge, August and September, and we'll just be doing the same.
Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
Now, is the country really a step closer to seeing COVID-19 become endemic? That big question and more with Dr. Ray Salinel Jr., Chairman of the Hospital Infection Prevention Control Unit at the Hospital ng Manila Medical Center. Dr. Salinel, welcome to The Big Story and thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
Doc, well, let's start with the basics kasi all this talk about endemic versus pandemic, in layman's terms, anong kaibahan?
Okay, ganito para mas madali unahin mo natin pandemic, epidemic, endemic. Pandemic talagang global. Epidemic, a region, continent. Endemic, parang locality or parang municipality, parang maliit lang na part ng isang bansa, no? So parang ganon, habang tumatagal, pandemic, epidemic, endemic, palitang paliit. Ibig sabihin, there is cases of very low transmission sa community, pasulput-sulput yung kaso, ayan, yun yung endemic na tinatawag po natin. Pero kasi, hindi pa natin kasi masasabi na we can have this endemic probably next year kasi we still have a lot of things to do pa no? Marami pa tayong kailangan pang alamin, marami pang data. Itong mga nangyayari for Omicron is still premature pa kasi yung data na nare-receive natin. Initial report pa lang yan Kaunti pa lang po yung mga research na ginagawa. Remember, November 24, last week lang ata November, na-discover itong Omicron.
Yes.
And we still have a lot of things to know about this Omicron. Ang alam lang natin is talagang napaka-grabe yung transmissibility niya. Sobrang nakakahawa talaga siya. At sabi nga nila, preliminary, mukhang hindi naman siya ganun nakakamatay kumpara doon sa Delta variant o iba pang variant na nagkaroon tayo. Pero again, premature pa lang itong data na nare-receive natin. We still need to wait for further like 2 or 3 or 1 month pa or 4 weeks bago natin maghintay tayo ng mga mas conclusive report para masabi natin kung ano talaga yung tunay na mukha nitong Omicron.
That's a very good that's very good context information. In other words, we still don't have yet the epidemiological data from which to make the conclusions with regard to Omicron. But Doc, let me ask you. Yes, Doc. Go ahead. Go ahead, Doc.
Alam mo, medyo delikado yung pagbitaw ng term na endemic Medyo delikado yung ganyan, ano? Kasi kami, doctor kami. Dr. Berjere is doctor, physician kami, epidemiologist, yung mga ganyan nagsasabi ganito. But then, ang hirap pagka hindi kasi doktor yung doctor of medicine yung nagbibitaw ng gano'n, baka mamaya isipin ng mga tao, uy, okay na tayo, sige, tanggalin na natin yung mask, tanggalin na natin yung face shield, kahit na malinis, marumi yung kamay natin, okay lang, kahit na magyakapan tayo dyan, kahit na mag-reunion tayo, mag-party tayo, go. Diba? Bigla mo ibababa yung, yung inyong protection, delikado yun. Kasi nga, premature pa lang po yung mga data, yung pong mga nalalaman natin tungkol dito kay Omicron. So, kailangan doble ingat pa nga tayo dapat kasi hindi pa kumpleto yung ating herd immunity. Hindi pa ganun talaga. We still need a lot of, yung hesitancy rate natin, kailangan talaga mapababa pa natin yan para mas marami pang magpabakuna at kinakailangan talaga ma-achieve natin at the earliest time yung pong herd immunity. Sabi pa nga, dati 80% lang Ngayon na gusto pang itaas pa nga na 90% in preparation for this bago nating bisitang Omicron, di ba? So, kinakailangan talaga doble ingat pa tayo.
Yes, Doc. Well, in fairness kay Father Austriaco, Doc, ang sasabi ni Father Austriaco, it's all contingent on continuous vaccinations and booster shots and na walang bagong variant na malala na dumating. Pero Doc, let me ask you this na rin. Moving forward, what do you foresee for 2022 then?
Very optimistic ako. With what is the turn of events right now. Ang dami nagpapabakuna, marami na pong ang hinintay na lang talaga namin dito sa City of Manila is 5 to 11 no? 5 to 11 years old, okay? Kasi 12 to 17, medyo marami-rami na rin po nababakunahan. Ito na nga po, booster shots na po binibigay namin for A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. Okay, so positive ako, optimistic ako na magiging maganda talaga ang 2022. Wag lang po talagang may bago na naman pong variant na darating, no? Kasi nga po, alam naman po natin, the higher kung meron pa rin mataas na active cases tayo, nagkakaroon ng chance po at nagkakaroon ng power itong mga virus na ito na mag-mutate pa further para magkaroon pa ng bagong variant. So, kailangan talaga po agarin natin, no? Let's move fast. Kailangan talaga mas marami pa humabakunahan sa panahon na ito.
Okay. Dr. Ray Salinel, Chairman ng Hospital Infection Prevention Control Unit ng OMMC. Doc Salinel, maraming salamat for joining us tonight. Much remains to be known about the Omicron variant, but what do the latest studies say about the variant first detected in South Africa? According to the World Health Organization, while there is evidence of growth advantage over other variants, it is still unknown whether this indicates higher transmissibility. Data also remains limited to show if it causes more severe COVID-19. But in Europe, all 212 Omicron cases are mild and asymptomatic. The WHO, however, says there is higher risk of reinfection with the Omicron variant. Based on initial data from South Africa, the country's health authorities previously observed that it has a 3-fold higher risk of reinfection than Delta and Beta. Testing, meanwhile, whether through PCR or antigen, will not be affected by the Omicron variant. And as for the efficacy of vaccines, the WHO says that more data is needed to assess whether mutations reduce protection from jabs.
These are the other big stories tonight. One of the 8 unlocated travelers from South Africa has finally been tracked by the health department. The 7 travelers yet to be traced gave incomplete or incorrect contact details. The High Court has already decided on the constitutionality of the anti-terror law, but the Supreme Court has yet to release its final decision pending final tally of votes. And PBA sees action once again with a nail-biter of a game. New Batang Pierre cager Arwin Santos came out big but failed to bring Northport that first game win. These big stories after the break.
Watching The Big Story. I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Maricel Halili. France has just been added to the Philippines' red list following the European country's detection of more Omicron cases.
Protocols for international travelers remain strict at the country's main gateway. But as for domestic travel, activity is slowly catching up to pre-pandemic levels. Gerard de la Peña with the story.
The country's main gateway is now teeming with passengers, a far cry from how it was last year, even in the thick of the holiday season. As provinces and destinations ease restrictions, many Filipinos are taking advantage either to take that much-needed rest or visit family for the holidays. Even airlines are slowly increasing capacity to pre-pandemic levels. But the threat of the Omicron variant is still stalling return to full capacity. Protocols remain strict for international passengers with arrival cap maintained at 4,000 daily due to limited quarantine facilities.
Ito naman pong measures na to hindi na po bago sa Bureau of Quarantine at sa lahat po ng agency na nag-aalaga sa mga papalik nating mga kababayan dahil ito rin po yung measures na ginawa natin nung panahon po ng Delta.
Seafarer Angelito, who arrived from North Africa, had to spend 7 days in a quarantine facility, time which he says should have been spent with the family.
Kakainin niya yung vacation mo pagka tsaka napakahaba naman kasi masyado. Iklian na lang sana yung yung quarantine. So para ma-enjoy naman ng umuwi yung kanilang vacation. Para makaspend ng time sa family ba.
But for George, it's better to be safe.
Kailangan unahin muna natin yung safety natin. Okay. Kung nagmamadali kang umuwi tapos hindi ka naman pala kung may virus ka, di maawa pa yung pamilya mo.
The Interagency Task Force is still looking at the possibility of cutting down the mandatory quarantine to just 3 days for passengers coming from select countries. IATF co-chairperson Carlo Nograles announced the escalation of France to the red list, effective December 10 until December 15. Passengers who will arrive from December 10 to December 12 shall be subjected to testing and quarantine protocols. However, passengers who will arrive from December 13 to December 15 would not be allowed entry. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, we are One News.
One of the 8 unlocated travelers from South Africa has already been tracked by local health authorities. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire says the OFW tested negative for COVID-19 and is undergoing home quarantine. 7 other returning overseas workers have yet to be located. Some of them gave incomplete or incorrect contact details, while others are unresponsive. The DOH has tapped LGUs to track the said OFWs. There are also no results yet for the genome sequencing of 12 positive samples of travelers from South Africa, Burkina Faso, and Egypt.
The PBA finally got the ball rolling for the Governor's Cup. After over a month of no PBA action, fans were treated to an exciting match between the Northport Batang Pier and the Alaska Aces. The game marked Arwin Santos' Northport debut after an off-season trade from the San Miguel Beermen. And the Spider-Man did not disappoint. He downed 23 points, leading Northport in a furious rally late in the fourth. Unfortunately for the Batang Pier, Alaska would go on to win 87-85 after a tough bucket from Robbie Herndon with 13.1 seconds left. Northport had plenty of chances to tie or win the game in the dying seconds, but were unable to convert. More good news for PBA fans. PBA Commissioner Willie Marcial hinted at having fans inside the venue by next week. This was after Pasay City approved the league's proposal. Fans, though, must be fully vaccinated to watch the games live. For News 5, Marty Bautista. We are One News.
Time for another quick break. When we return, as the country awaits with bated breath the Supreme Court's final decision on the anti-terror law, petitioners fear the measure might be used against the opposition in next year's polls. Australia joins the U.S. in its diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics. Other countries like the UK and Japan are considering to follow suit. And it's been a year of some of the most fascinating videos on TikTok. And the social media giant just dropped its entries from the Philippines this year, including that Squid Game challenge. The details after the break.
Still watching The Big Story. I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Maricel Halili. The country holds its breath as it awaits the Supreme Court to release its final ruling on the constitutionality of the anti-terror law.
One of the petitioners challenging the measure says it might be weaponized against the opposition in the 2022 elections. Marina Kaide with the story.
Supreme Court justices have already reached a decision on the constitutionality of the anti-terrorism law, but the High Tribunal has yet to release its final ruling. Supreme Court spokesperson Attorney Brian Osaka says they have to accurately confirm and tally the votes on the numerous issues on the case. A total of 37 petitions were lodged to challenge the measure. Senatorial candidate Attorney Nery Colmenares, one of the petitioners, is hopeful that the law will be declared null and void, especially Section 4, which defines terrorism.
Ang definition nga naman ng terrorism is overbroad and very vague, no, that it could encompass anybody. Depende sa definition nila ng intention mo. Ang daming batas diyan, bawal naman sa revised penal code yung bomba, pagpatay, pagmassacre. Bawal naman sa Human Security Act yung mag-commit ka ng terrorist acts. So ano pa yung kailangan diyang batas na yan? Is for the dissenters and for the activists and for the opposition.
That vague definition of terrorism, says Colmenares, may be used to harass those running for the opposition in the 2022 elections.
It has a devastating effect in the elections is because precisely the president is given the power to order the arrest of anyone. Dangerous talaga yan na poder sa presidente, especially since may election na darating.
The National Union of People's Lawyers is also awaiting the SC's final decision.
It is with both excitement and anxiety to learn that the highest court has finally voted on the various transcendental issues on the Anti-Terrorism Act.
The Office of the Solicitor General said that these petitions should be dismissed. The OSG had argued in the past that the law will not implicate those who are not involved in acts of terrorism. Pending the release of the results, petitioners believe they have a strong case with 37 challenges filed before the High Court. For News 5, Marlene Alcaide, we are One News.
Here are the election-related stories we're watching. During a visit in Tarlac, Vice President Leni Robredo admits that she has a smaller number of supporters compared to other candidates. Before making her way to the province, she first went to Baguio City, where she revealed that people have been egging her firstborn Aika to run for politics. But Robredo says only one member of the family can enter politics at a time. Traffic was stalled at one side of Commonwealth Avenue in Quezon City during the motorcade of Bongbong Marcos and Sara Duterte. The caravan took over the roads for almost 5 hours, prompting the QC-LGU to advise motorists to avoid the area. Marcos and Duterte have apologized for the heavy traffic. Davao City mayoral candidate Rui Lopez insists that the Dutertes left a bad legacy in the city. In an interview with All Politics is Local, Lopez said the Dutertes normalized killing, corruption, and abuse of power. He adds that it is time for President Duterte to retire from politics. Recall that Rui's father, former Davao City Mayor Elias Lopez, introduced Duterte to politics back in 1987.
And here are the other big stories around the world. Australia will join the U.S. in their diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced the move on Wednesday, citing China's alleged atrocities in Tianjin, along with the souring trade relations. He says their athletes will go to China, but not their government officials. U.S. allied countries like Britain and Japan are also considering to join the move. China has condemned the move as political posturing and further says that they don't really care if Australia comes or not.
As this year comes to a close, social media giant TikTok just dropped its annual year-end video, and it's bringing back so many feels. In the Philippines, the Red Light, Green Light Challenge in Robinson's Galleria is hailed as the most popular video. An ASMR of grocery organization and a paper-cutting art of Hollywood actor Tom Holland have also made the cut. In trending dances, meanwhile, videos of young actress Andrea Brillantes and internet sensation Yana Guerrero occupy the top spots. One security guard also grooved his way to the list. In a statement, TikTok's Chief Operating Officer Vanessa Papas said that 2021 was a year of connection and discovering new things. So far, 1 billion users all over the world are part of the TikTok community. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Malambot ang katawan ni Manong Guard.
Talented si Kuya Guard.
Oh. Well, caroling is as much a part of Filipino Christmas as other traditions like Simbang Gabi and Noche Buena. That's why with the easing of restrictions in the country, two friends made sure to bring back the holiday tradition.
This, however, was not your simple Christmas caroling, as they took their performance to the next level. Meet Jade Villa Velez on violin and Siegfried Katipay on guitar. The string duo were seen caroling in Barangay Quiyot in Cebu City. The now viral video was uploaded by Alex Yap.
Yap says that he was buying milk tea when he saw the two caroling to the tune of Ang Pasko Ay Sumapit. He said he was amazed by the performance that he had to record it and post it online. Nakakaya naman magbigay ng barya sa ganyan, di ba?
Ayun nga iniisip ko, parang nakakaya pag 5 pesos.
Mga check
Parang,
ibibigay mo dyan.
parang kailangan pakainin din ng early Noche Buena.
Milk tea.
Ganon. 17 days to go before Christmas. Tuloy pa rin ang Pasko, mga kapatid. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. On behalf of Robbie Lampay, I'm Edwin Gao.
And on behalf of Gretchen Ho, I'm Maricel Halili. We are One News. Good evening.